Okay, welcome. Blockchain as a service. BaaS? BaaS? Development opportunities. The idea behind this session is to get you started on being able to develop against a blockchain type of a project. So a lot of it is just going to be a lot of references. We'll be talking about different things. Won't go too deep into the code. You'll see a whole lot of REST API references that we'll be digging into, and really a way for you to get started, really digging in, setting up your own blockchain, and then kind of developing against that. Myself, I'm Joe Homnick. Kind of with this blockchain stuff, I put the CPA in front of the Microsoft Regional Director. But basically, started out 30 plus years ago. We won't say how many, 30 plus. And got out of school, was a CPA, went to work for what's now KPMG. It was back to so long ago, it was Pete Mark Mitchell back then, the PM of KPMG. And went to work for their audit department, and I was the new guy, and computers were just coming in. So it's, the old guys didn't want to have anything to do with them, so it's, hey, new guy, you're going to become the computer audit specialist. So sure, perfect timing and everything. So I really, got into the whole IT area originally as being a CPA. And doing a lot with the internal controls and so forth. And back in 2014, I started getting interested in Bitcoin. I said, let's set up some miners and start mining it. And then it turned into this kind of little farm. I got a little carried away with it. And after about 8 months and complexity and having to reinvest in all the machines and everything was going up. Plus my lease at the Cogent data center was running out, so basically just left them. Actually left them running for several months until they just shut them down. So got into it back then, and it kind of dovetails together between the CPA stuff and the blockchain, because basically blockchain is a ledger. And, I kind of got into the accounting stuff where you had your journals or you had your ledgers, and you would make entries into the ledger. And you had these debits and credits that needed to equal, and you had an auditing type of scenario. You wrote everything before the computers in pen, so it was somewhat immutable. If you had to change something, you made another entry. And that kind of dovetails right into what we're talking about when we're talking about blockchain. So a couple of links there. One's to our meetup group, and the other one, if you wanted to know what an RD is. Regional Director. Poised to disrupt the market. So when you hear about blockchain, you hear things like disruptive, related to the individual technology. And of course, it's going to be bigger than the internet itself. So we'll see. But disruptive in the way that it basically creates this ledger system that allows you to work directly between contracting parties, so that you don't necessarily need the middlemen that you needed in the past. And this is what it means with this disruption. So if you have a job that has agent at the end or broker at the end, this is the technology that is going to replace those functionalities. Not tomorrow, maybe never. But that's the idea behind when you hear this disruptive. That's the disruptive part. So once this thing starts rolling and you're starting to get these ledgers and you're having the suppliers and buyers of different types of things working completely together, you don't need those middlemen. You might not need a title company to get title insurance because it's all in the blockchain. All right, so let's go further on this. What I'm going to do is actually start with a couple of examples, and then we'll go into how it works, and then we're going to go in and you're going to see how you can start learning to develop against it. So here we have Maersk, and this is actually using the Microsoft blockchain and Azure approach. And basically, they have this scenario where you get insurance as you move from port to port to port, and there's a lot of communication that needs to take place. You know, people getting on the phone, emails going back and forth to be able to set up this insurance. So instead of all of this going on, they then set it up so that everybody that was involved would be part of this blockchain. And then it bypassed a lot of the middleman type of implementation. So pretty big operation there using it. Another one, Webjet. So if you're part of the Webjet, you can go in, you just don't rent the jet. They'll get you your hotels, your transportation, take care of the whole trip for you. And then, of course, they're going to run all the hotels and, you know, all the transportation and so forth. So basically what they would do is work with different vendors, but then you had all of this types of communications that had to go on, people getting on the phone, is this confirmed, emails going back and forth, visiting multiple websites.
It's Uber for airline. Uber for airline.
Oh yeah, what would happen to Uber? If we had a blockchain and the drivers were part of the blockchain.
Get rid of Uber.
So, thinking along the right lines there. There's the disruptive part. You don't necessarily going to need those middlemen. You might need some kind of rating service though, right? Maybe rating services or something to invest in along with it. But you don't need the middlemen then. The payment could be handled, everything, scheduling, and so forth, all within the individual blockchain. So basically Webjet, instead of having all these different, you know, operations going on that require different types of communications and different types of systems, trip insurance, all that kind of stuff, basically set up the blockchain. So that if you're going to be working with Webjet, you're going to be running in the blockchain. Anybody heard of these things?
Yeah.
It's blockchain. Bitcoin was the original blockchain project. So, and here's one of the questions I always get right away. Okay, here's how you buy Bitcoin. Many ways to do it. But simply go to Coinbase.com.
No, they are hiding.
Not this one. Gemini.com.
BTC. Yeah, Robinhood's an interesting one.
Since last month, mine is
Yeah, did
37.
Robinhood actually start?
No, not yet.
Yeah.
You can only see them.
Yeah, you can see
You
them.
can buy, yeah.
They're not in Florida, yeah.
So yeah, sorry for for you know people that don't know. Robinhood is a operation that basically transfers money, does stock originally for free. So they're basically getting your audience. So they're going to be doing Bitcoin within the next few weeks, basically for free. So you'll be able to transfer to your bank back and forth, whatever the exchange rate was at the time.
And since last month, mine is 37%.
People day trade Bitcoin, that's the thing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I kind of look at this one here.
Exactly.
If you were
This
there,
is what you gotta.
if you were there,
I was actually.
and did you keep it? So what are you doing here?
Yeah, I started 2014 and mined and just left them there. I almost sold it a few times, but never did, fortunately. So you can just go up to Coinbase, set up an account. These are actually registered, so completely legal type of an operation. Although the IRS wanted to get to their records, and they went through the whole court system and was able to fight them off and not give them the records.
They do now. If you have 20,000,
If you have more than 20,000?
yeah, then they report.
More than 20,000 people.
Oh,
No. Don't we go?
transactions probably more than 20,000.
Yeah, 20,000 like in US dollars.
Kind of like doing 10,000 in cash from a bank.
Right.
Yeah, same idea.
Days away.
Because right now it's considered a property, an asset property, for tax purposes. So, just go up to Coinbase, go up to BTC, go to Robinhood, attach your bank account, use a credit card, and you can buy and sell Bitcoin to and from cash. And also, on this one, it does Bitcoin Cash and Ethereum.
I like them.
And Litecoin. Ooh. That's a pretty good one. So, these are examples of blockchain technology. Bitcoin, the original. And it basically came out of the 2008 failure that we were having in our markets with what are known as fiat currencies, basically currencies that can be manipulated. And it was generated using the blockchain technology. So really what you're after is, you can think of the blockchain as being a database, a shared distributed database. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But also, it's really the engine around it. So the actual data itself is, very important part of it. But how that data and how those transactions go into it is another part, and that engine that's around it. So think of it as a blockchain engine, kind of like if you look at SQL Server and you just see the file structure below it. It's really that database engine that you're talking about and working with and interacting with. All right, so let's keep moving on here. And we aren't going to go into a lot of real detail related to this, because the idea is to get you started developing against it. So we have this secure, shared, distributed ledger. And it's like, well, is it shared or is it distributed? Anybody work with distributed databases? Basically a part of the database is in every one of the areas. And you needed all of them to work, all right? You only had parts. Well, this, you get a shared database, a complete copy. However, you need to have a distributed network that actually maintains the transactions and verifies the transactions. So basically, blockchain is a system, a ledger of maintaining information that is hack-proof and verified. Bitcoin, blockchain, has never been hacked. And God, how many times has it died?
Yeah.
And it just comes back. Can't kill it. So the idea is that you now have this system that you can rely upon to maintain this individual ledger. And a big part of it is that it is verified. Yeah.
So you said it's never been hacked, but you always hear about people stealing bitcoins. So why is that
So
not being
a
hacked?
part of Bitcoin is you have, or the way that Bitcoin works specifically, is you have a public key that you share with another party, and that public key is actually your wallet address.
So they're key guys.
So
Somebody's
if
wallet.
somebody can get your private key, you're done. Or here's another one: Bitcoin's completely deflationary. If you lose that key, there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoins out there. And we'll talk more about the verification system, because we're going to use this as one of the examples. We're going to use MERS and Webjet also as we start talking about all this stuff. But there's only going to be that many Bitcoins, and there's an original circulation, and then you have something known as mining that adds more Bitcoins up until 2140. You also get a tiny, tiny transaction fee along with it. Yes?
Are you going to talk at all about the performance characteristics of the distributed ledgering system?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So, one of the problems. Yeah, let's move on to this next one. So, one of the problems, you got your traditional system here, and basically everybody's communicating with that traditional system. Think of the stockbroker. Think of the insurance broker. And they're maintaining a centralized system, and they can scale that system, and you have individuals coming into it. In blockchain, everybody that is part of the blockchain has an individual ledger. They have a copy. So if you're a Bitcoin miner, true miner, not just in a pool, but if you are a Bitcoin miner, you have a complete copy of Bitcoin since the beginning. And you are maintaining that copy. So now I also kind of take this and say, okay, well, Bitcoin's public. Probably the biggest part of what you're going to be working with is more of private, but we kind of call it consortium. Because private, like an individual company, is probably not going to just set up a blockchain in and of itself for its own operations. Unless maybe it's really distributed and they have, the departments don't communicate, they work like autonomous companies. Maybe in that type of scenario, you might set up a blockchain. So every one of these gets distributed across and verified. The biggest slowdown is the verification side of it. So here's how Bitcoin, and also I put Ethereum up there and Ethers. So here's how that verification of how do we make sure, say, okay, yeah, this is the block of transactions. I agree with you that this is the block. I'm verified. I'm verified. I'm verified. Okay, we move on. Everybody has their own copy. There's no more reconciling ledgers. So think of that. Basically, if you've got a company and you're reconciling ledgers across each other, it's possible for a blockchain project. However, how do we get to that verification, especially in a public fashion, where they have these there's these old economic concepts where there's the tragedy of the commons, where basically they say, well, when you have a common thing like you're letting your cows all share a pasture, you're always going to work to your self-interest. Another one, the Byzantine generals. Hey, if I don't really trust you, and let's say you're over here and we're both going to attack at the same time a castle, but if I attack and you don't, I'm screwed. So how do you get over this type of a scenario and create what's known as a trustless environment? And the way that they do it with the public blockchains is through something known as mining. So basically they make it your own individual self-interest to have the common interest at heart. And you get rewarded for it. So basically what happens with mining is that they put out a hash that has to be solved, a value that has to be solved that will verify the block. And the only way to solve it is by guessing at it. So the more hardware that you throw at it, the better chance that you are going to solve one of those individual blocks and get Bitcoin. Yes?
So if Bitcoin works off of,
And that's how Ethereum works also.
specifically Bitcoin, if Bitcoin works off of this idea that you're incentivized to maintain
The common interest.
but your incentive is to get Bitcoin, but there's only limited Bitcoin, what happens when you hit limited Bitcoin?
So it's actually two parts. There's a transaction fee and there's the Bitcoin reward. And the Bitcoin reward keeps going down, and a block, the complexity is based upon how fast you can do the calculation, and it's set so that it'll be right around 10 minutes. So if you start solving it faster, it gets more complex. If it starts slow, it's not going the opposite direction. It would get easier. And the way it's calculated out, it'll go to 2140, if the same exact. And then it'd have to go to transaction fees. There is a slight transaction fee included in there also, and the higher the transaction fee you want to pay, the faster it'll be mined. Because the miners, of course, have their own algorithms that say, hey, let me pull this in because there's a higher transaction fee. I want to put together these transactions that have higher transaction fees, so I also make this off of the transaction fees, just not the reward for solving it. Oh yeah, and if you want to, I wonder where that slide went. Skip it. I must have. Yeah, I thought I had it in there. If you really want to look into it, and it's just not the technical side of it, but also kind of the theory behind it, there's something known as the Book of Satoshi. And it's basically, Satoshi was supposedly the programmer that wrote it. However, everybody thinks that it was a group of programmers going under the pseudonym Satoshi. And they basically did postings in the crypto news groups. And I think that his last posting was 2011. Or no, I think in 2014, supposedly they found Satoshi in CNBC, and I think it was outside of San Diego. All the news networks were showing up outside his house. So Satoshi came in and did one last post and say, "That's not me." But I think the main book ends in 2011. But he basically goes through how it works. So if you really want to, and I suggest anybody that's going to blockchain, just get the ebook and listen to it. How it all works. And then, some of the problems that they were working through when they were doing the beta, the early versions and so forth. And also the whole idea behind how you handle this proof of work, which is what mining is called. Proof of work. So, highly suggest going through that. All right. So I think we're getting this down. Basically, everything's stored in the ledger, and we're kind of talking about public here, but same thing with private. So maybe if you're a buyer and supplier, you got a copy of the ledger, you got a copy of the ledger, you got a copy of the ledger. But do you necessarily need to do a proof of work with mining? Because you have your own self-interests in a limited trusted type of an environment. So there's other ways of handling that, because mining is, and even with the public, you know, there's different ways of handling it. Proof of stake, Ethereum is working on that, and they've tried to do it a few times. Like, how much do you actually own? Are you going to be hurting yourself by not verifying the correct values? And if you have enough of them that come together, and Bitcoin might go to proof of stake also, because it's, you know, I think to run it's like the equivalent to mining across the world right now is equivalent to running a small state in electrical power used. So it might not be the most environmentally friendly approach, or the fastest. You got that, you know, every block's 10 minutes, and I think there's 7 transactions per second, which is, you know, you talk to an enterprise person and it's like, 7 transactions? Are you kidding me? However, you know, it's software, so they're constantly working on it. There's something known as the Lightning Network, or Sedgwick, that they're testing out, and I think they had the first transaction in January. And, you know, it'll make micropayments possible. You know, so the throughput of the transactions will go. You know, the proof of stake could handle the mining types of problems. But in your private one, you set up your own. So it really doesn't matter. And there's some interesting things there also. So you aren't going to do this unless the project meets certain types of criteria. Are you crossing trust boundaries? Multiple parties. Kind of the whole reference that I made back about, hey, do you reconcile ledgers between each other? Then it could be a blockchain type of a process.
So on that last slide, is it an and or an or?
I mean,
If I say yes to one, then I need blockchain, or do I have to say and this and this? Do all 4 have to be answered yes?
Are they mutually exclusive?
Exclusive? Or
good
to get?
question.
So if I say is the business process that crosses trust boundary yes, then I should use blockchain.
And then you can say, hey, we don't have any intermediaries already.
Right.
But we're going across trust boundaries, and you have manual verification steps. You're doing the ledgers. So I'd say you got to say when is the or.
Is the manual verification as far as checking to make sure if the
Reconciliation
document
of
is correct
ledgers.
and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff? The document is correct and all. Okay.
Send the audit team in, get your audit report, that type of stuff. Ooh, CPA auditors, huh? So, think of Bitcoin as blockchain 1.0. That was the original. You know, that's how it all started, and it was specifically for financial transactions. I think you had 250 characters you could throw in as comments. And you'll see people that'll throw opcodes in there, but still, it's, you know, not another big, it's immutable, and it's been proven. That entry's going to be there. Like, you know, like you might tie a Word document to a, I think a Word at every time that you do a save, it maintains a certain, or it gives you a different value, a different type of a GUID, a nonce, a single number that you could then stick into the blockchain, and if the 2 numbers don't agree, the document's been modified. So there's add-ins that'll actually do that for you and say, hey, this is not what you stamp this in as being the final document.
Question for you though, as far as the whole blockchain, if I'm in a contract with, you know, 3 parties, who's actually creates the network?
The consortium.
Yeah.
That's why it's called,
So
it's kind of the consortium, and there's something known as the CoCo Framework that we'll talk about in a little bit.
Is that an external party?
Well,
Or that I have to go-
it's the people getting together. So you have company A, B, and C, out of that company A, B, and C, you get a consortium of people that all get together and say, this is the way that we're going to do it. Here's what the contracts will look like.
Okay.
So everybody kind of agrees together. Now, maybe the big company A says, B, if you want to do business with us,
It's almost like the Walmart.
it's going to, it's a consortium, but we're doing it my way.
So the companies who are actually going to be involved, I mean, from a business perspective, they will have to understand that they have to put this consortium in place, and then they have to agree on, there has to be a process as far as agreeing what it's going to be.
Yes, that's how it would go apart, and you define, because it's immutable. When you define it and you start it, now it's a little different with 2.0, but you start it up, you don't change it. It's hang on, we got that. It's software. We can work anything out, right? So once you get that, and if you took like a Bitcoin, which was a set schema that if something changes, you basically have to fork it. So that the blockchain, it's basically blocks of data, one change to the next to the next. So basically you could go from one down all the way to the original genesis that started the whole. So it's actually very traceable, but it's anonymous, so that kind of.
So if you fork, what happened with the ledger? Is it start completely
So
new
if
setup?
it forks, the original ledger can keep going on. Or you say, as of this point, so like Bitcoin Cash is a good example. That forked, what was it, last August? Yeah. And then he said, okay, well, this is going to be Bitcoin Cash. Everybody that had Bitcoin at the time of the fork now has Bitcoin Cash. And we're using this different type of a method.
They got both, though. They got cash and.
Right. So the fork completely changes it.
But it
And on
goes
it
off
goes.
the main chain. The main chain remains. And everything else forks, but it's off the main chain.
Yep.
Does it have record of the previous ledger? I mean, it has
Yes.
of the.
So
Bitcoin.
as of the time of the fork, like everybody that had Bitcoin Cash at the time of the fork.
Do you create a new ledger or do you add to the existing?
It just goes on a different
ledger?
block.
Okay.
So the actual data itself will be Bitcoin up to this point, and then as of August, it'll be Bitcoin Cash.
But if it's a company.
But if it's still in Bitcoin, it just keeps going off of that original block.
I was going to say, if it's a company and then you agreed on some sets of data and then you change your mind, are you adding, like for example, that ledger that you have with the property?
The beauty of blockchain 2.0 is the concept of smart contracts, which I think will answer your question.
Okay.
So that as part of the blockchain, you can put in basically executable code. And here's where you probably, if it's a private, you want to have agreement, whether it's forced or people get together and actually agree on it. So now, hey, I just deploy another contract. And then we start using that contract. And it's still using that same type of system to make sure that it is secure, it's immutable, can't be erased, and it's all accountable. However, now, and this is basically what Ethereum did, coming out, I think it was 2014 also, that gave the concept of you can define inside of the block, instead of having your 250 characters that you could play with in Bitcoin, you could define this concept of contracts. And hey, we even have a contract language called Solidity, the .sol files. And we're going to take a look at this. So that you can now, as you're putting into that blockchain, you're putting these contracts into the blockchain and then could be using those contracts in the future. So blockchain 2.0 came out, smart contracts. So you have additional logic inside of it. So here's an example or a summary of basically Bitcoin and Ethereum. And there's a bunch of other ledgers. We'll talk about a bunch of them. Well, it's right there, I'm sorry.
Right.
Corda, Hyperledger, Sawtooth Lake. Just, you got any crypto anarchists in here? Okay. They'd never say it anyway, right? So a whole bunch of them out there that you can use as this blockchain engine. This whole concept of the ledger plus the verification, the distribution, the transactions system. In Bitcoin, you just had the standard, you had 250 characters and comments that you can play around, throw opcodes in and so forth. Now you have this generic contracts based around the Solidity, if it's in Ethereum, definition. Instead of just one blockchain, you can actually link multiple blockchains. So become more of a distributed type of a system as opposed to purely a shared system. So I've got blocks up until this point, you got blocks to this point, and maybe different forks for different types of implementations, all building off the original. Bitcoin, public.
I didn't quite follow that when you say multiple linked blockchains. I mean, I thought there was only one linked chain.
Now you can actually start, let's say you started at a certain block.
Okay.
And you're trusting that all this other stuff, like in Bitcoin, or in the standard Ethereum, you can go all the way back to the original Genesis currency or block. Here you might start at a certain block and say, hey, I know a company has the rest of this, we're good. Or you could, go ahead.
So when you start the Bitcoin chain, so you start one block, is that the one block related to one Bitcoin and it keeps on growing because of transaction, or and everything is there from every single Bitcoin, every single transaction?
Let's say Bitcoin's an example of blockchain, okay? So let's just say blockchain, and then say, okay, this is how Bitcoin does it. The Bitcoin implementation does it. So basically it starts from a block, and they call it the Genesis, and then you have transactions that add up to an individual block. So I'll do a time. Good.
For this particular Bitcoin or
for Bitcoin, for Ethereum, for Hyperledger?
So each transaction is a block?
No.
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 So there are multiple transactions in a block.
Actually, on my sample app it is, so that gets confusing. Let's take a look here. So there's another site you can go to blockchain.info. BTC does a lot of this also. And notice you're getting blocks in here. And who actually solved the block? BTC, Bitcoin.com, BW. So these are the actual miners. And you can see the individual size. And if you drill in here, there's 987 transactions in this block. There's the previous block. There's the next block. So any kind of blocks that you have, you can just follow all the way through. And it's made up of text or cryptographic hashes. So it's a combination. You can go right into the block, you'll see just some plain text in there. Comments. Yeah.
Is it like a linked list? A huge linked list?
It's a chain of blocks.
So how, I think that's a good question. So for a programmer, how would you do that analogy?
Addresses.
Right.
Programmer, there's a link
But-
to it.
oh, they think about
Cryptographic
language.
Yeah, they're addresses.
Your address?
You're basically your wallet.
Exactly.
Your wallet is an address.
Right,
It's actually single.
So you send it to an address.
Have to be double units. That's actually.
right.
I don't know. I just wrote this like yesterday. So.
The link to it.
Yeah.
Will your sample project help us understand it more?
You can
Yes.
go to the sample project, that's what it is.
We're gonna move forward.
Since when? This session.
So, we probably could use interfaces around this, right? Am I going to be sitting there and actually writing to these individual transactions inside the blocks?
No,
Or reading all of them against the actual file itself? No, we need APIs. So if you wanted to do Bitcoin APIs, there you go.
You install it.
There's your install command here for the different languages. So what's happening is, hey, we need this wrapped up. Where's the .NET framework for blockchain? Where's the database? Where's the SQL database engine for this? We don't want to be working at the structure
Machine.
level,
almost like machine level.
the machine level. Now, you might, but you're probably writing APIs in. So you get something like, in this case, I have Strato. And this is a dashboard into my own running blockchain right now.
Your own node.
My own blockchain.
Oh, you're creating your own blockchain.
So
So basically, Strato, and we're going to show you this, there's a template inside of Microsoft Azure. And you say, hey, and you're going, oh man, if you're going to be doing this, you're going to be spinning up a bunch of different VMs, right? You got to have a couple miners. In Ethereum, there's actually an EVM, Ethereum virtual machine. And then tie this all together. And if you go to ethereum.org, you go to Hyperledger and you go down and start trying to put this all together yourself, it's going to take you a lot. I mean, you're going to know it.
I'm just going to ask, why would I do that?
So basically, yeah, why would you do that?
The Strato is yours or is it?
No, Strato is one of the templates out there. We're going to look at the different templates.
So Strato is a separate company?
This is, yeah, well, it's actually Block Apps. And they've built this dashboard. Oh, and a bunch of APIs into this blockchain.
And that is your IP there, 1392 and so on?
There. Hit it.
So that's yours, Joe?
Yep. Well, it's up in Azure. It's a VM running up in Azure. It's actually a Linux VM with a whole bunch of Docker containers. And I'll show you the architecture in a little bit. As a matter of fact, if you're interested, I think I put a putty session up here. There it is.
Would you say your username and password was?
You wasn't able to remember it anyway.
And is this where all your Bitcoins are stored?
This is completely development environment.
Just asking.
Blockchain talk to steal somebody's Bitcoin.
Yeah, dude. So there's and had to hone up my 1990s Linux skills to get this all running.
Wow.
And actually work with Strato because, you know,
Sounds
as I keep fooling with a open source project, it breaks. So you can see, here's all the containers. I'll show you how those containers all tie together. So basically what this does is create a Linux VM for you with all of these individual Docker containers and an API to interact with those containers that are really the blockchain underneath. And there's quite a few out there that are doing it. This is the one that I found the easiest to get up and running. Because this is the developer version, it's one VM. They have a multi-node one also.
So you could do all your dApps right in this environment?
Yes. So a dApp is a distributed app. And you can just do your contracts with a code editor.
Would this run inside the Microsoft Hyper machine? Hyper something?
Hyper.
Well, no, this is Linux VM.
But you cannot run it inside the micro.
You can run, yes, they have, but if you want to use the template, it creates a Linux VM. And if you want to use a Windows server, you then just generate all the Docker containers inside the Windows server, and I'll show you in the getting started. So if you wanted to do it yourself and actually generate the containers, you can do that also. I did this so I could say click, and then a couple more days of trying to get it to work. But it's going to be a lot easier now. The docs were, kind of fixed and that, that kind of stuff.
So that's the question. Can you deploy that on your own cluster? Let's say you already have that Kubernetes cluster. You can deploy that on your own cluster.
Yes. Yep. All right.
So this would be up on GitHub or something?
Yes. As a matter of fact, good question. There it is.
Black Ops.
And if you notice down here, getting started in Azure. So the steps on actually doing it. Where's the other one?
Would the free tier be enough to run something like this?
Yes.
You sure?
Yep. Yeah, because you're just doing one VM. Yeah, just the developer edition. Don't do the multi-node. And I'm going to get to, I think I can get to it from here. So basically it does a workflow with a buyer-supplier type of a thing. So the buyer goes in, as a matter of fact, it even gives you its own demonstration because doing an X window with this internet connection, I don't think we can do that. So giving you all the individual commands. These have changed over the last 2 weeks.
Wow. So is this what you followed, Joe? Or
Yep. I had to dust off my own Linux skills. No, I think Block Apps is its individual company.
Okay.
So there you see that. Let's go back to
so will block?
this dashboard, and let me go new. Oh, blockchain.
Okay.
So in Azure, you'd have to set up your own VM, and then you have to add all the firewall stuff to it, and just like you do a LAN server or something.
Yep.
So you can use.
So there are all the ones that'll give you out of the box to certain levels, and you can get started. And you basically follow through it. The one that I've seen is that's probably the easiest. It just does the one individual VM.
Have you tried the truffle?
No.
Have you?
Oh, yes.
So you can do Hyperledger on this as well.
Yes. Quorum. Morgan Stanley. Oh, just about every big company has their blockchain proof of concept running right now. So go and grab it, and of course,
So when you got into, Joe, when you got into Microsoft Azure, then they have a section where you just go into blockchain and you'll get this?
yes. So notice Developer Edition, single node Developer Edition. And you just walk through it. So go add, they even have their own little blockchain area off of the add button. Go in there, just type in Strato and grab the, I think they put Strato Developer Multinode to begin with. And it basically just walks you through, gives you an example, all the different links.
Joe, when you're actually deploying this though, like, you know.
And that's the VM that you would deploy. Which is it? I haven't got to it yet. Next step. So I think it's less than 150 a month if you let it run all the time.
Is that VM from VMware, or is that another VM?
Azure VM.
Azure VM. Just virtual machine.
And this spins up the Linux and deploys the individual containers inside of it, but you also have, you could do your own Windows VM and then deploy the containers.
This is Hyper-V, basically, on
Yeah.
Azure.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So if you just want to experiment with this thing, you fire it up. You just fire it up, play with it for a day, and then you could deactivate
Then you
it.
can shut it down.
But you don't lose it. You can just hit a button and bang, you're back up. You don't have to relaunch
It's Microsoft.
I had issues doing restarts and stuff, but
Really? It's not as
it's still, you know,
In theory.
it's getting there.
2 days later.
But if they're starting.
And if you go to their forums, you'll see that a lot of people had troubles actually stopping.
Start.
I think when you saw it go in there, it says a restart's required for the updates. Dude, I'm not doing it.
I had trouble doing that.
Well, what you do is it only takes a couple minutes to deploy the whole thing. You deploy it and you're right into the dashboard. And then you run the commands to create the API server and the UI. And then you can access the
Put it
UI.
on ice, for example. You just can't,
Put it on hold.
like shut it down, but just create the container and maybe deploy it to your laptop.
What's the
Sure.
purpose, though? What's the purpose of doing that?
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, the
He
idea
doesn't
is
want
to
it-
save money.
He doesn't want it consistently
Yeah.
running.
Got it.
You are paying for this.
I'd say
They charge it.
it's almost as easy to just
Well,
recreate it.
actually, that's not what I was thinking. It's I usually try something until it breaks, and then I just start again,
Yep.
and so it's
Well,
just
stop and restart it, and you'll probably break it.
well, that's my point. I don't want to just throw it away. That's my point.
Right.
That he-
So.
Well, and you do the coding outside of it. It's just a standard startup. I mean, I guess you could put the code inside of there, but the idea here is also, you look at here, it does this, and basically you then just go and hit the dashboard. The dashboard right here. And then it also has the sample app. The sample app creates these contracts right here.
So the end result is what have you done?
Why would you do all this?
No, I do all this, and what's your end result? You you show a demo and you say, let me run it, are you gonna show that? What is the purpose
What
of
do you
it?
have to show for this?
I see all the, do you understand my question? Like, what's the end result of this?
Oh, you actually want to see the demo?
Sorry. I asked such a ridiculous question.
But the problem is that it's you have to X window. You have to only do it in the way it's set up here. You only do localhost.
Yeah.
You can start writing your own
In command mode.
REST
Local host in command mode.
commands
Okay.
against it, and the way that you could So this is just their example. And they even
Okay.
have like a moving demo.
Okay,
So I think my time's better spent not
okay,
doing that.
all right. But what was supposed to be the result? Tell me
So-
in words what
Can
the
you
result,
describe it?
what was the result supposed to be?
So the result here, hey, you know the admin username.
It's like every default app.
Here
Yeah,
is your result.
That's
All the
the
posts.
API calls.
Those are the API calls. You could start writing your own program in C# or anything to start manipulating this.
The ledger or what exactly?
The ledger, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And the contracts. Well, you can create your own individual contracts and then manipulate the individual contracts.
Okay, so you can create your own smart contracts and then do kind of simulate a blockchain.
Yep, and they have their sample app to say, to go
Okay.
by. So you can say, hey, how did they write it? And here it is. You have all of their code.
so this block
So
apps,
if we go into
So you
here,
can write your own cryptocurrency.
your
That's what
own,
you're
you
saying?
can actually
No,
deploy
I
your
see.
own individual distributed apps. Well, I've got my own cryptocurrency running right now.
Get rich in
I've got my own cryptocurrency running now.
what they do.
So the difference is that you don't have a programming language. You don't have like Solidity on this. You have.
Oh no, you have Solidity.
Yeah.
You have
You got to
Solidity.
define the contracts with Solidity.
Inside the contract is Solidity,
So I'm going in and defining the
and
contracts.
outside it is C#.
or whatever language. So you have inside here Solidity,
Inside the contract.
right?
So we're looking at the outside contract.
We're just looking at
This is
the,
what's deployed on a server,
yeah,
not the contract
right.
itself.
And where's the contract, Joe?
That's a DApp. It's in there.
Right,
In the coin.
no,
So
but it's here.
as
right?
part of their dashboard, so they're
Right.
delivering a dashboard to you, right?
Yeah,
So as part of this dashboard that they're delivering, here's the contracts.
Okay.
And here's how you could upload them.
okay.
But you have an API that you could use to upload it also, and you could even write your own individual dApps and deploy them through the dashboard. So this is where it's kind of going. Remember I said, you aren't going to be working directly in it, and as we keep going,
It'll be
this is
higher
an
up.
example of abstraction, right?
It'll be higher up.
So it's abstracted it more and more, and you're basically going in, getting those API calls, bundling them then into an app. You need an example. They got their example app of how they're using those individual APIs.
So this
But-
is your blockchain.
This is, I could, if I
Okay,
wanted to let you in,
So if you click blocks right now, there's probably only going to be a couple of executed blocks, right? Or mine blocks.
well, the way they did it,
Wow.
every transaction is blocked. That's why I said,
Oh,
remember
yeah.
the earlier conversation? I said this is going to be confusing.
See, right.
Well, that's
Did you
because
say no?
that's because you could do it.
You can do
any way
it
you
down
want.
to
That's
that
what I
one.
was saying.
One transaction, one block.
To keep it simple, use the
So
KISS
that block
principle.
covers the knots.
Yes.
Keep it simple.
Single number, yeah, let me get going here. So here's the blocks, here's the transactions. And the way that they set this up, in every time you had a transaction, a block was created inside the blockchain.
It doesn't have to be. but
Doesn't
keep
have
it
to be,
simple.
no.
They
Right,
made it very,
right. It depends on how you set up your verification service using the APIs.
so who are competitors to Strato Management Dashboard? Is
Oh,
one-
everyone that we just looked at inside of the,
Yeah, there was a whole list of them.
Oh, that was the
oh,
whole
actually,
list.
hey, even better.
What?
I have a partial list here.
Okay. So these are all competing with that.
I think they all have or are going to have templates in there to automatically generate your
And does it-
startup projects with APIs, with dashboards.
This one.
Does Ripple have something
Oh.
in Azure?
No, I don't think so.
You have Ripple.
Ripple, private.
Where do you see Ripple? Oh, it is in
Right
there.
there.
Right. And does Microsoft
Yeah, I guess
have
so.
one already?
Well, Microsoft basically is based on Ethereum. A lot of these are based on Ethereum too.
But does Microsoft have?
Whereas Hyperledger is its own individual thing. Ripple is its own individual
thing.
Yeah. But if you think about it, well, okay, it's Ethereum based, but it's just Ethereum based. Now you got all the APIs on top of it, the way that it's being put together. How do you upload the contracts?
Have you or maybe anybody in the room heard of any concrete applications of blockchain technology like in the government space?
Yes, the government of Estonia has their own individual, they haven't gone to the voting, but they have an ID system.
I thought they did voting already.
Did they do the voting?
Yeah, they have voting already.
But I don't know if it was fully, maybe. But there's another one for blockchain, voting. So yeah, and there's loads out there.
And there is a new association that is called Government Blockchain Association. Yes. And their headquarters is in the Skokie
Venture Cafe.
Venture Cafe. They have an office there. That's all they are doing. The U.S. government.
So there's a lot of use cases for blockchain currently.
Yes. Well, I just showed you MERS, Webjet, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ethers, the public Ethereum, as opposed to the private. Blockchain 3.0 coming shortly from Microsoft. Soon.
DVD. I'm now on DVD.
Made up of
Seen on
different
TV.
parts.
Seen
The CoCo Framework. The .NET framework on top of blockchain. With a whole bunch of, basically what's the .NET framework, a bunch of APIs, right? Confidential Consortium Framework. CoCo. Yeah, not the cartoon. So basically it's taking and extending how you work with blockchain, taking that, hey, I've got this immutable, verifiable, I know it's going to be there and it's going to be right type of a ledger, and then adding different levels to it. So you got the blockchain core, you got a configuration state, persistent store, goes out, and it actually communicates through, anybody heard of TEE? This is how the verification occurs. Trusted Execution Environment. So trusted execution environments built into the hardware. You have physical control over it.
It's in hardware though, right?
Yep.
So it's in.
And then you put a wrapper around it, but that means that you know who you're communicating with, which is another big problem with the blockchain. Who do you think you're communicating with somebody out there, but with TE, you know.
So it's like online dating, verified.
We're just looking for all these practical applications. So that whole verification process actually goes through the TEE.
This is like
and everything gets encrypted. And you have block level or transaction level filtering.
That's like a
so as you have the ledger, you say, hey, I don't want this ledger with all this other vendor buyer stuff on this guy's system, right? Well, based upon the CoCo framework and what you have access to, it can limit your access to the blockchain. Even though you've got the whole thing there, you don't have full access to it. 5 minutes.
You've got 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And if you love
And 2 more
blockchain,
slides.
you've got little hard chocolates going around. So.
Oh, it's Valentine's
Is that like a...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so the TEE, you said it's hardware verified. What exactly is the hardware part such as doing the verification?
So it's actually executing code internally that you are then accessing from the outside, but you know it's tied to this individual machine, this individual
How do
piece
you
of
know?
hardware.
It's like a MAC address that's uniquely
You can
identifying
fake
a
it.
device?
It's like a Mac.
Well, yeah, let's not go into the. I'll throw the TEE out there, and you can look more into it. We'll not, this could go for. But yeah, check out TEE and check out how it works. That's an area because that's really how this all works. So some of the pain points with smart contracts, we'll go through this real quick. I'll put a link up on the meetup. But basically, Microsoft's coming out with the enterprise smart contracts. Because contracts are, we're back to client server again? Here, we're getting a logic layer inserted with the enterprise smart contracts. You heard the term Oracle, basically that's like blockchain.info. It's pulling the information out of the blockchain and delivering it in an understandable fashion, or an API type of fashion. And the final thing is, hey, these are all workflows. Like if you go through the demo app is the buyer goes up and puts out a bid, or he wants to buy certain things. The supplier comes on, responds to that bid, or makes a bid on that project. It goes back, the buyer, the buyer. So it's basically a workflow until finally money, ethers, are transferred. Actually WEI, W-E-I, which is the smallest measure of an ether.
What?
WEI, W-E-I. Whereas in Bitcoin, it's known as Satoshis.
Satoshis, right?
The smallest measure of that you can transfer in Bitcoin. Well, they say, hey, we're just going to create a visual environment. So you're going to pull up a tool like Visio and start dragging and dropping and connecting the lines, and it's going to generate that whole workflow of contracts.
And generate the code.
And generate the code, and then of course you'll have to fix it or make it work. It'll generate a framework for you to start. It'll generate like you saw, with Strato. And then you got to start doing the specifics. It's going to generate all the contracts and what contracts are needed, and then you got to tie it all together and deliver it with a UI to the end user.
2 days later.
Is that going to be open source?
I believe each one, I think CoCo is already out there as open source. And when I actually saw this demoed, it was VBA running inside of an Excel spreadsheet. I think that's going to change. I probably shouldn't have said that. But it's concepts. This is what's coming. This is what's coming. They just want to be able to show.
That's where they want to go.
Yep. So 3 things that are coming up in the future. All right, we're done.
Where's the video?
We're gonna put up the meetup, right?
Yeah.
Which meetup?
Oh, aka.ms/GCUG.
These slides are going to be available too?
They'll be up on the meetup also.
And where's
So
the link?
let me put that up here.
I'm not part of the meetup.
So this is the Gold Coast.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And your slides are there too, Joe?
Well, they aren't yet, but they will
But
be.
they will be. Let me take a picture.
I do
The
trade.
Gold Coast, we started
On
like back in
Bitrex and
1992.
GDAX.
Remember?
But
Joe, your
much money is
the only great thing now is really to advertise your CPA, blockchain.